Yak Gadget, made in America, based outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Yak Gadget offers all kinds of storage accessories, quick mount motor mounts, anchor systems, track mounted accessories, even paddles. Go to yakgadget.com and get your kayak decked out for your next trip out on the water.
The 153 Bait Company, based in Troy, Ohio, make everything from plastics to custom painted hard baits. Hook 'em hard and hook 'em often. All of our baits are made to order and all of our hard baits are hand painted to order. So go to the153anglers.com to place your order today.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Off the Water, your premier podcast for all your travel destination and kayaking fulfillments. What is up? I'm your host, JP. Today, we're going to have a special True North edition of the podcast. I'm super excited. This is going into uncharted territory for me. Because this is somewhere I've always wanted to go, and hopefully in my lifetime I get to explore this area. But without any further ado, I want to introduce you to my guest today, Mr. Josiah Pleasant. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks, JP.
Awesome. Josiah, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what got you into kayak fishing, man?
Yeah, fisherman from birth right here. So it's a part of my family lineage, but grew up in between Colorado and Washington and then going up to Alaska in the summers. And for a few years now, I've had the blessing and opportunity to call Southeast Alaska home. So home base is actually on Douglas Island, so across the way from Juneau, but part of the kind of community there. And kayaking is both recreation for me. It's a way of building relationships. It's an outreach for me, and I'll share a little bit about that. And it's also how I fill the freezer. So it's a big part of my life.
Awesome, man. A lot of what we know in the lower, in the lower 48, is that Alaska, when you say it's way to fill your freezer, it's like the last frontier that's left. There's, so much that you actually have to do in order to survive. So when you start to incorporate kayaking as a means of living as well, that's pretty intense. I don't think a lot of people, I shouldn't say, I do have an aunt who lives in Anaconda, Montana, and she has to prepare in the same way because she's so remote. But there's so much more that's becoming commercially available to us here, where you guys still are pretty much the true pioneers of what this country has left.
Sure. Yeah, it's a totally different way of life than anywhere I've lived in the lower 48 for sure.
Awesome. What got you into kayak fishing?
So growing up, my dad, his release on the weekends was always getting out and going fishing, and he loved to troll for salmon. That was his bread and butter. But we got out and we fly fish together on rivers as well. And when I was probably 8, got my first kayak and realized I could get away from the noise. There's no drone of the motor, no crowds of people, because I could get onto skinny water that bigger boats couldn't get onto, but I'm also, out in the water. So I'm getting away from the wade fishermen, and it was its own niche. The serenity of it, the peace of it, the beauty of it. I was hooked. So I've had a kayak and been kayak fishing since that point in time. It gets me to places that you can't easily get to otherwise. In the winter time in Southeast Alaska, we winterize our outboard motors, right? So you've got to winterize them or they're going to get messed up. So when everything's winterized, most of the boats aren't getting out. But if we happen to have kind of a balmy day in the wintertime, I can pull a kayak out and I'm good to go. Don't need to worry about anything winterized with the kayak. So it's kind of fulfilled a niche there. I get into some inside passage waters that, again, big boats cannot get to. And the way wildlife and a lot of the fish that I chase are, they're pretty spooky when boats come around, but they're not spooky with a silent, bending branches kayak paddle. I can kind of sneak in there and and it's like I'm a part of the landscape. So that's been a lot of fun. So yeah, it presents a lot of opportunities. Of course, keeping my body active and fit, that's really nice. I'm sponsored by Jackson Adventures, and so I love to use their kayaks and their gear. And then I'm also sponsored by Advanced Elements, so a kayak company that makes inflatable kayaks. And so whether I'm going in a big boat or a bush plane, sometimes there's no room to take a big 12-foot kayak, but I can take a little suitcase of an inflatable kayak. And so both inflatables and full kayaks have been a part of my repertoire for a bit now.
That's awesome. I got a couple questions with that too, but the first one is, what Jackson are you paddling up there?
So for a couple years now, Jackson has been wanting to get a U-pick to me. So it's a new kayak that they came up with. It's actually named for a tribe up in Alaska, the U-pick Nation. And the U-pick are famous for being kind of the inventors in kayak, is what they put together thousands of years ago, and it's something that Jackson is kind of giving a nod to. Because of COVID and because of production issues, I don't have my U-pick yet. So I've been rolling with my skiffs and rolling with my Advanced Elements inflatables and kind of going from there. But eventually when COVID allows, we'll get a U-pick up here.
Cool. Now, one question I do have that's intrigued me with the way Alaska is and the way your temperatures are. Do you guys get above do the water temperatures and the air temperatures get above 120 degrees when they are combined together at its hottest point in the season?
No.
So when you're out kayak fishing, are you always in some kind of protective layering for hypothermia year round?
No, not generally.
No. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's something down here. Being a fireman and being out on Lake Michigan as well, which gets very rough. Even like today and yesterday, I wanted to go out fishing on Lake Michigan for smallmouth bass, but just that a gentle north breeze sustained at 15, 20 miles. It was white capping. We had riptide, and we had beaches that were closed by not that drastic wind, but we follow that rule of thumb because we do so many water rescues with people who are underdressed for the spill if they were to take it. And, being that, again, adaptation is a huge thing too. If you guys are adapted to the cold, what might be cold for us down here, you guys are adapted to up there as well.
That's true. Yeah, so kayaking for me in Alaska is always a part of a larger journey. Hardly ever do I get to just get in a kayak and that's all I'm doing that day. I'm usually hiking in to a spot where I'm then kayaking from, or climbing a mountain to get to a spot that I'm then kayaking from, or running a big boat across the water, hopping out, taking a kayak, getting to where I can put a smaller boat in or a kayak and going from there. And so we have to be really conscious of how much weight we're bringing. So having a whole nother set of gear to wear on the kayak isn't feasible most of the time. So, if we're going to be hiking up a river, usually wearing a good pair of Sims waders, and that's going to be what we're wearing on the water. There are situations too where if we're hiking up a mountain, you've got your lighter weight gear that you're wearing, to climb 4,000 feet that day. So everything that you're going to bring with you ends up having to go on your back at a certain point. So you got to figure out where you can minimize gear.
That's awesome. And for that, is it more recreational or is it for more lifestyle where you're going to have to do a hike in or a climb in? I guess my question is that the way you're sustaining your living, or is that part of sustaining and recreation, or is it just purely recreation?
Yeah. So, for me, it's personally a lifestyle for me. That's okay. A part of who I am, and it's where I feel like I breathe easiest and I get to be myself, and years of background and building skills and just different experiences come into play. And so there are moments for sure where it's something that I get to enjoy, and the peace and silence of calm, it's just me and God out there. There are trips that I take where I'm inviting folks along from a nonprofit standpoint to come to a place of healing. So there are trips that I've got lined up for the rest of this year where I'm taking folks out, and there's an intentionality behind the trip itself. Whether it's someone that's coming from a difficult background in the military, kind of a wounded warrior type trip. It could be someone that's working through things in their lives in general, and they need that trip to be able to talk things out and figure out what their next steps are. It's always clarifying. And so for me, it's not something that I get to make an income off of, but it's something that I've developed as an outreach, as a ministry, as an opportunity to share what's most important, but to do so in a way that I don't really have to say words most of the time. The country around me and the fish and the animals, they do the talking. It's a place that humbles you. It's a place that it brings things out of you. And truth be told, JP, every time I take a trip like this, I find something out about myself, and I build relationships with the people that I'm with. And so that's become a big part of this for me. But it's really funny as my friends get to know me and dive into things. They kind of see, oh, you really do fill the freezer on these trips. And so it's what I eat, brother. I'm eating halibut, salmon, venison, and bear year round. So that's a big part of my life. Going to a restaurant for me is an oddity. That's not something that I do. I'm usually grilling out and having friends over and sharing that bounty with the people in my life. So the food aspect of it is part of it too. At the end of the day, I don't go to a gym. My fitness regimen is the kayaking, hiking, backpacking that I do. And it, when I'm in season, it gets me into Spartan shape for sure. So there's a fitness aspect to it as well.
Absolutely. And, like I said, I haven't ventured up that way as much, but going to the closer where you were originally, going out towards Montana, Wyoming, and you talk about like national parks like Yellowstone or the Tetons. And I remember I was out there in 2017, and I was like, you know what? Because I run here in Chicago, I bike, and I work out, and I stay in great physical shape. But when I went just to do a mile run at Yellowstone, I got about a half mile in, and I was just gassed because of the oxygen that gets thinner as you go higher in elevation from sea level. Chicago, we're only maybe about 200 feet above sea level. Going up to Yellowstone, man, you're up there, man. You feel it. You feel it. Right. So I could only admire how well your lungs are prepared, being that you're climbing mountains on the daily. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's a blessed life, man.
Cool, man. Well, you had mentioned the food aspect, and part of what we do is, consider restaurants. But you know what? Before we jump into it, you made me kind of rethink that part of the segment of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to put the chip right there on pause for that. But one thing I do want to know is when you're fishing, in kayak fishing in the areas you're at, is there a certain, like, how we have certain lakes here in the 48s and rivers and stuff? Is there certain spots that are known to, like, if you were to say, hey, JP, let's go to Lake X, and this is where we're going to catch, these fish? Or is it just kind of like, this is a general area, and this is where you find the fish? How does fishing work up in Alaska like that?
Yeah, so most of the fishing's in the salt. When salmon enter fresh water, that's the end of their life cycle. When they're first in fresh water, they're still chrome and they're still good to eat. So catching salmon in the river is legit, but they pretty much stop eating. Your silvers will get bitey, coho will get bitey, but most other salmon, once they enter fresh water, one track mind, they're making the next generation and they're going to die. And so most of our fishing's in the salt. So there's places where we go to fish for halibut in the salt that we know, hey, that's generally a pretty good place to go. And absolutely, there's places that we go for salmon that are generally at the mouths of rivers. It's when the salmon are staging, getting ready to go upriver, and catching them in the salt there. So yeah, there's go-to spots, but most everything's in the salt. Not a lot of lake fishing. By the time that sockeye are the only salmon that spawn in lakes, by the time sockeye get to a lake, they're degraded. I mean, they're literally there just to spawn, and their bodies have degraded, therefore their meat's degraded. So we like to catch sockeye either in the salt or just in the river as they first come up. There's some freshwater fishing, but your freshwater fish are so much smaller, you're going to have a harder time filling the freezer chasing freshwater fish, and those opportunities are fewer and farther between. So nutrient density is highest at those river mouths where salt meets fresh. So that's kind of the sweet spot where I spend a fair amount of my time.
That's awesome. Now, have you caught, and I've seen pictures of giant halibut and weighing 100+ pounds. Have you had the fortune to catch one pretty much bigger than you and the kayak put together?
I've caught an 82-pound halibut on the fly on a kayak. That was an inflatable kayak. And I had about a 10-minute window where the wind changed directions. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to get the rod out real quick and pull this off. And a buddy of mine, Paul, had been telling me, hey, you can catch them on the fly in shallow water when the salmon runs have been going steady, because the halibut actually chase the salmon, and the bigger halibut are eating salmon right before they go into fresh. And so, yeah, I got 82-pound halibut on the fly. I can send you those photos for your podcast.
Awesome.
But, that was a pretty big fish to try to get up, and you can't pull that into the boat at 82 pounds. I mean, it's not going in the boat. So you either try and gaff them. So you keep a gaff hook, which is precarious in an inflatable kayak. You want to limit the amount of sharp, pointy objects in an inflatable. What a lot of guys will do at the 100-pound and bigger mark is they'll carry a firearm to put the halibut down, because they'll bust you up. I mean, their tail is so strong. And so, no, I didn't use a firearm, but had a gaff with me, and just, I corked the tip of the gaff with some pool noodle and pulled that out, and then had to one arm paddle myself into shore to be able to fillet up the halibut and get it done. But yeah, it's a lot of fun getting after those bigger fish. There's not much else like it when you start getting after big halibut in a kayak.
Have you paid attention to the news as of late of what's going around the world?
I mean, it comes to me, just kind of in relationship, as friends are talking, but I try to limit how much I'm taking in just between work and trying to get out and stay fit in my relationships. I kind of limit my news intake, but it tends to all come to me anyways. So yeah, I think I'm fairly aware.
So did you hear about the gentleman who claims, because it's hard to prove at this moment, but he had been swallowed by a humpback whale off the where is it? Chesapeake Bay area. Chesapeake in Massachusetts. Huh?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, there was a kayaker just a couple weeks ago that was swallowed off of California too.
Get out of here.
Yeah, the humpbacks bubble feed, and so they'll get in a group and they literally come up with their mouths like this. And if you're either not paying attention or just happen to be in the wrong spot at the wrong time, I've had humpbacks bump me. I've never been swallowed, but they bump me. So yeah, it's a thing.
Oh man, that's something that in my mind I'm going. I don't think I've ever had to worry about a whale like that. And hearing that story, and now being that you're in, and I know whales are quite frequent, over in Alaska. Yeah. Interesting perspective from you to see that, just to even know you've encountered a whale that close, something that Goliath, that's huge.
Yeah, they're not predatory, right? So they're chasing bait fish is what they're chasing. And the reason why I end up around whales a lot is those same bait fish what salmon or halibut are eating. And so we tend to all end up in this same healthy ecosystem together, but they're never chasing you. I mean, that guy getting swallowed, that whale was focused on eating bait fish, and the dude happened to be there and just, he got caught and the whale spit him out. I guess the whale broke his leg, chomped down. But yeah.
Yeah, the gentleman who was, off the Chesapeake Bay, he, from what I understand, so at first he was initially considered critical because of the fear of crush injuries, compound syndromes. But he wound up making a full recovery, and he was talking about it. So it's interesting just to have to think of. That's kind of an aspect you have to watch out. I mean, bears will get you, but then you got the whale, and if the whale decides to swallow, it's like Pinocchio.
Yeah, I've had orcas bump me as well. Orcas are you've got your there's two subspecies of orca. There's one that's a local orca that chases salmon, and then there's a subspecies called bigs or transient, and they chase marine mammals. And so I'll be in salmon fishing, and you catch a salmon, and every sea lion and harbor seal in the area, they tend to notice, and they'll kind of chase after you. Last year I was had a big sea lion. He's about 12 foot long, this sea lion, so 2,500 pounds. I mean, big old stellar sea lion. They're huge, terrifying. He grabbed onto a salmon that I had on a leader. So you catch your salmon and bonk him and get him on the leader, and he's floating in the kayak next to me. And all of a sudden I fly backwards, and I'm just sleigh ride backwards. I'm like, holy cow, take my kayak paddle and whack the sea lion, and he lets go. In that same spot a week later, a group of transient orcas came in, and they cleaned house on the sea lions. I mean, they just go in, and the orcas are literally eating the sea lions. So we're all cheering because the sea lions are kind of a mess. They'll hunt you a little bit, and the orcas don't really mess with people. But I could see you could be in a situation if a sea lion happened to be messing with you at just the wrong moment, and an orca comes after him, you could get bumped by an orca too. But I've been in a couple situations on big boats when a harbor seal, and I've had a sea otter jump on the swim deck of the boat because orcas were chasing them around. So the orca never bothered the boat or anything, but they'd wait at the swim deck, 10 feet off, waiting for that sea otter or harbor seal to hop off. So it's a big world.
Yeah, man, that's an awesome cycle up there. That's cool. So let's hop into it, man. We're talking about how things are being eaten and procured. So usually what I do is at this point it's restaurants, but with you saying that restaurants are out the equation here, I want you to give me, if I was to come out there, your top 3 meals you would cook for your guest.
Yeah, so you can't beat fresh grilled king salmon. King salmon are starting to run. So I'm going to be pretty heavily focused on king salmon for the next month. And you pull a king salmon out of the water, treat it right, get it home, slice it into steaks. Oh man, there's nothing like it. Fresh Alaskan king salmon, same day over the grill, a little salt and pepper, maybe some lemon. Nature's got it all lined up for you there. You don't have to do a whole lot of work. So that's a crowd pleaser. So I'll have a crew up here in a couple weeks, and they'll probably just be eating king salmon, at least once or twice a day. It's pretty good. So with king salmon, and I'll kind of go in order, and how the relationship works. You can save the heads from the king salmon and you put them in a crab trap. Most of the crab that I catch is Dungeness crab. So you catch your king salmon, fillet them up. My dogs get to eat a lot of the salmon. I cook up the salmon for them. You actually can't give it to them raw. There's a parasite they can get, and it's a problem. But I found that the bone structure in the bigger kings that I catch, it's too much for the dogs to easily digest. So I save that for crab bait, put that in a crab pot. With the Dungeness crab, pull them up, crack them open, get all the guts out, boil them for, about 7 minutes or so until, it reaches a nice foam on top and they're red. Delicious, man. A little bit of lemon and butter. oh, it's pretty good. So that's meal number 2. The halibut, they chase both Dungeness crab, and the halibut do chase salmon. I've had several people tell me that my fried halibut's the best fried fish they've ever had. So I've got a proprietary blend of batter that I make, and it's pretty delicious. So you slice the halibut into steaks and go from there. Halibut and salmon are both super meaty fish, so the percentage of meat that you're getting from the weight of the fish is extremely high. So that 82-pound halibut, I mean, you're eating for a couple of weeks, and that's meals with friends. So a lot of good meat. But yeah, those 3 from the sea, those are pretty good meals there. So kings, dungies, and halibut.
So where's my plane ticket to come? Because that sounds awesome.
It's a nice way to live.
Cool. Now, how remote are you from Juneau itself? Like in terms of remote or wilderness, where are things easily accessible to add accessories? So like a grocery store, or like maybe a liquor store or a convenience store, something like that. Is that within range, or is that something that has to be thought out and accommodated to go to and make a huge trip out of it to go there?
Yeah, so on the island that I'm on, Douglas Island, there is a bridge that connects Douglas to the mainland, and Juneau's on the other side of that bridge. And so on Douglas, we don't have a grocery store. There is a convenience store, but of course you're paying out the nose for anything that you're going to buy at that convenience store. So I don't buy anything at a convenience store. Juneau itself does have a couple of grocery stores. So if you want to go to the grocery store, you can. But again, everything's shipped up, right, to Alaska. So you're paying out the nose for, grocery items that would be significantly cheaper where you are. So anything that you can do yourself, well, you're doing yourself a favor from a checkbook standpoint. But yeah, I mean, there's some things that of course I end up needing to get at the grocery store. I don't grind my own flour. I buy flour for the halibut batter. I don't make my own beer, although a lot of my friends do. But I buy my own beer, and if I need to get some veggies or fruits, some years if we have a sunny summer, you can actually grow a fair amount because it's light all day, right? So food grows really fast. So if you have a garden, the last 2 summers now, we've really not had much sunshine, so you couldn't grow much to speak of. I kind of live a straight keto diet, which it's kind of funny. But that's just the way I live. So that menu that I gave you, king salmon, Dungeness crab, and halibut, as far as seafood, I can do that every day, and I'm happy as a clam at high tide. So, but I do have a fair amount of red meat too, but that's all meat that I get myself. So yeah, that's the grocery store situation and how that plays out for me.
Now, it's funny you said you're doing keto without intentionally doing keto, just because the way things are up there. So, and part of my ignorance, if this comes off the wrong way, but is there enough land, or is the climate sustainable to have cattle within Alaska, or is it just impossible?
Not where we're at. So I'm in a rainforest, and there are no cows. No, it's not sustainable for cattle. It's old growth rainforest where it hasn't been logged, and it's second and third and fourth growth rainforest where it's been logged. So not suitable for cattle or for most livestock. There's some pigs that you could do that are cold climate pigs that do okay in the wet. There might be a couple other animals, but other than that, I mean, there isn't a whole lot that you could try and do long-term or sustainably with livestock. But then again, God's placed some amazing wildlife that when managed well and that we take care of well, we do pretty good. So, yeah.
Good. Awesome. Now, you had mentioned craft beers. What are your 3 craft beers or beers of choice that you would go on and recommend for people to try from Alaska?
Yeah, so I mean, if you got an Alaskan on your show, it's could come across as cliche, but we all drink Alaskan. So Alaskan brewery is pretty staple. So my three favorites, there's a jalapeno pineapple gose that they came out with. Holy cow, it's really good. I lived in Mexico for a couple of years, so having some spice when I'm having a good plate of seafood, and that pineapple zest that comes out in it, it's pretty dang good. You know, that's pretty solid. I like their stouts. I'm a stout guy. I got to teach in Scotland and Ireland, and you know, good stouts hard to beat for me.
Absolutely.
And so I do really like. Yeah, I like Alaskan stouts quite a bit. You know, being from the Pacific Northwest, they come out with different things from local berries, and the stuff that they make with local berries is really dang good too. And so I like those. They call them their pilot series. Every summer they'll come out with generally 6 or 7 brews, and they tend to go over really well. So that's Alaskan brewery. Rainier's really popular. It's just like a staple, like lower cost beer. So we call it pork chop in a can. So a lot of guys will backpack with Rainiers, and at the end of the day have a cold Rainier, having ribs over the fire on the beach, a couple of cold Rainiers. That's pretty staple too.
Cool.
I'm a pretty simple guy, so that covers it for me.
Awesome. Now, I usually go and we talk about, you know, like distilleries or any type of, you know, where they would make malt liquor. Now, I guess that's a question. Are there distilleries in Alaska, like micro distilleries?
There are, but that's, you know, in mainland. So Juneau does not have access to the highway system. So Juneau itself functions as kind of an island. But up in Anchorage and going out towards Delta Junction, you know, there's definitely some infrastructure for distilleries. And I know there's at least a couple. But in Juneau, there isn't. There's just Alaskan Brewing there locally that's pretty significant. There's some smaller breweries as well, but Alaskan is the main deal in Juneau.
Now, with that being said, is there a, you know how like in the Appalachians there's moonshine? Is there a certain kind of drink or specialty spirit that's crafted for Alaska or for Alaskans, or that you Alaskans make that, you know, it's only to Alaska. If you don't go there, you're not going to know about it. And then when you try, you're going, holy crap, I need to bring this home to my friends, but you're going to forget the recipe.
Yeah. You know, they're just the climate and the access to grain is so limited that, you know, it's not super common that folks have brewed their own stuff, you know, from scratch, right? So from a cultural or historical standpoint, there are folks that do it, but it's generally one-off type stuff. But I tell you what, most guys that are going to be in the backcountry for a while, they're going to have a flask of whiskey. And it's pretty common. And some of it might be Russian influence. And some of it's just, you know, I've also heard of guys purifying water this way, but using vodka and just having that on hand, like, this looks a little murky. Put some vodka in it, it'll kill the creatures in it, kind of deal. But yeah, it's pretty common for guys to have you know, a flask of something in their backpack. But generally, it's something that folks have picked up from a store, not something that they've made themselves.
Oh, cool. Now, so we're gonna segue into because obviously, you know, with the climate and the landscape, it's hard to have like a vineyard or make wine in the area. However, though, let's get into the national park system there, if you don't mind. So with the national park system, how many national parks, if you can refresh my memory, are in Alaska, if you know offhand?
Oh, I mean, but we don't count them. So the deal is, like, other than the Anchorage metropolitan area, and Fairbanks is getting to be this way too, most of Alaska, I mean, you go a few minutes past wherever you live and you're out in it. So whether it's state land, federal land, or in monuments fall into federal or national forest, which is not a national park, I mean, you're out in it. And so national parks are not super common for most Alaskans that are kind of living the Alaskan life, because you generally can't hunt. And in some national parks, you can't fish. And so most folks are wanting to get out in places where you can engage in that lifestyle, where you're taking care of your family from a food standpoint for the year. And so most of my hunting and fishing is in the Tongass National Forest. The Tongass is the largest national forest in the country. And actually, you'll kind of see the news on this, and it's a kind of a big deal. They rescinded what was called the roadless rule. The Trump administration did. And the Biden administration, it looks like, is going to overturn that and bring the roadless rule back into effect. What the roadless rule means is, for the 9.2 million acres that I hunt and fish in, and that hundreds of thousands of other Americans get to enjoy, both residents and non-residents, you generally can only access most of the best places by boat or float plane. And there aren't any roads. The only exception to that is Prince of Wales Island. We call it POW. Prince of Wales does have a pretty significant road system. But most everything that I do, JP, there are no roads where I go at all, which means generally there's no people, which from a fishing and hunting standpoint, I mean, it's like going back to the Garden of Eden. It's amazing. There's no other place like it that I've been on the planet, and I've lived and worked on six continents. So, I can speak with a little bit of background to say Alaska is an amazing place in that sense. So when I talk about national forests that has a roadless rule, which the Tongass here, hopefully in a couple or a few weeks, we'll have that roadless rule reenacted again. It's a place that's preserved to be pristine. It's preserved to have that old growth forest. It's preserved to have amazing hunting and fishing opportunities, and hopefully will be that way for generations to come. Something that some of my older friends told me when I was younger, JP, I would come up to Alaska and fish. I think the first time I got to come up to Alaska and fish in the summer, I was 9 years old. The old timers would say Alaska's just 30 years behind the lower 48 in terms of fishing, hunting, just shrinking, just the encroachment of the suburbs and metropolitan areas, that kind of thing. And unfortunately, they're pretty much right for anywhere that you can build. And so one of the unique things about the Tongass National Forest is it's so remote in some places, and the mountains are so steep, and the way the tides are, it's so difficult to even put a dock in, that a lot of these places, if a rule like the roadless rule is kept in place, they're not going to change, at least the land itself. Now, in the water, the problem is the same salmon that I catch on Fish Creek and just across from Juneau, Alaska on Douglas Island. That salmon's likely traveled thousands of miles in its life. And that salmon's going to have to evade international fishing, right? Other countries, once you're 12 miles off the coast, they're out there fishing for salmon. We've got our own commercial fisheries. We've got charter fisheries that are, chasing salmon with tourists coming into town. And then you've got the subsistence folks. And so our saltwater fisheries have been on a steady decline across the board. And there are rules in place to try and help with that. There's some ocean acidification that's taken place, this amalgamation of water that's low in oxygen called the blob off of the North Pacific. That's literally a dead zone where all of the smaller organisms that bait fish eat are gone. And so the bait fish are gone. And so you get salmon that are coming back either skinny or stunted or even emaciated because they didn't get the food they needed. Obviously, a lot of salmon don't survive because of that. And so, in terms of talking about your national parks, for us, it's really a national forest. It's the Tongass. And for us, as we're kind of looking at that, it's an interesting scenario in that the saltwater that we're fishing from has really been decimated. And so it's a unique time for me, JP, in that the fishing and hunting and opportunities that I have, they're really, really precious, and that in a lot of places, those opportunities are going away. And it does feel more like a lower 48 type fishery in some places, places that are dependent upon hatcheries, right? So artificial involvement of people to try to pump more fish in because the native fish aren't making it. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, but it's definitely a current event as far as the Tongass and the roadless rule goes. And I'm hopeful, but I tell you what, I'm in the midst of trying to carpe diem every season, because there's no guarantee that it's going to stay pristine and bountiful as it is even a couple years from now. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, even here in the Great Lakes region, we were talking, I being in Chicago, I'm on the southwest end of Lake Michigan, and we went to when was it? The end of March. We went up to Traverse City, Michigan, which is the center. It's pretty much like the eastern center part of Lake Michigan on the Michigan side of the state. And, the waters itself up there are blue, and it almost looks turquoise. I know fishing's good there. I mean, there's a lot of, I shouldn't say untouched, because it's a populated area, but it's not like here in Chicago where, it is. I mean, I've watched so much happen in terms of, environmental destruction, conservation not being put up first and foremost to try to help sustain what's going on. We have erosion that's happening, some natural occurrences that are occurring, but at the same time, it doesn't help that there's industry all along Lake Michigan as well. And going into the inland lakes, when we talk about that, those are the lakes that are further away from the Lake Michigan itself. When the spawn happens, I don't want to fish during the spawn, just because I want our fisheries to sustain. Does it need the help of artificial help with hatcheries and stuff? Absolutely. That's why we have stocking programs. But the other problem we have is people don't really pay attention to regulations. So they'll keep a 9-inch crappie, a 14-inch bass, and then catch a 22-inch bass and keep that same 22-inch bass. And now you have what was a big fish in that water gone. There's nothing there to sustain it. It took that fish forever to grow. Will it have died off? Yeah, but that's still a producer, and that's still producing more eggs. And people don't understand the concept or the idea of harvesting limits, and actually, is what you're catching worth harvesting? Because what are you going to get off a 9-inch crappie? You know what I'm saying? Right. You gotta have these in place, but again, people don't care. You got your weekend warriors who don't pay any regard. I could tell you right now, I watch our Department of Natural Resource Police. They're always out, and they start with a full ticket book, and they write tickets that don't get paid. It's insane. And for someone like myself and like you, who love this land, who love nature, who love God's creations and what's here, it hurts to see, but the best you can do is continue to do your part to make it sustainable, Yeah. Well, I'm happy that you still have a slice of heaven, but also, that statement's scary, that you guys, that 30 year, when someone told you that when you were 9, which was probably 20 something years ago, now is coming to fruition, Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you pretty much have to get to where people don't go, but then even then, anything that's coming from the salt has passed through many, many spots where it had to evade issues that are definitely, caused by people. So it's interesting. Anything that has a life cycle that goes out to sea. I mean, you can do what you can to protect your area and clean up your area, but if another country decides not to, what do you do? So our main river, the Taku, we share with British Columbia. And British Columbia has horrible mining policies. I mean, they literally just dump chemicals from their mining into the Taku. And so even though that's dumped in British Columbia, it impacts our fishery in Southeast Alaska. So it's pretty interesting. You take care of what you can and you're responsible for what you can, but in a larger ecosystem, you're dependent upon other people contributing to that cleanliness and that, that bounty as well. So it definitely takes a global village to try and maintain a solid salmon fishery. And unfortunately, that global village has not participated at a high level together in some cases, in some places. So, yeah.
Well, you know what? Enough of the sadness and thinking of it. We're gonna move on. So this next topic is the one that I want you to kind of, if you could take. Actually, I think I know where you're gonna go with this once I ask the question. So I'm gonna pose the question to you. You answer it how you feel appropriate. If you can, now usually I ask, what are some, places to go for like children's museums or, monuments to see or so on and so forth. For you in Alaska, someone comes, and it doesn't have to be anything related to kayak fishing. It can be a combination of things if that. What is, and you might have touched on it earlier, but what is the wow factor that you're going to show somebody that they could take away and go, wow, this was well worth it? And again, I think I know where you're going with it, but it's good to hear again.
Yeah, I mean, the wow factor for me personally, and what I share with those that I'm close with that want to get after it, is taking them out and doing the stuff that I do on the water in the mountains. I mean, it's truly, I mean, there are moments in time that are clarifying for my life, and I love sharing that with others. And so first and foremost, definitely getting people out doing all the things that you've gotten to hear about in this podcast episode so far. I do have friends that'll come up and they're either older, maybe dealing with an injury or a disability, and can't get out and do some of the same things in the same way. And so there's some amazing things to do around town. There's a glacier, that Mendenhall Glacier, that's just inside town. So you can drive right up to it and hop out of the car and, walk a quarter mile, and you've got these panoramic views in front of a glacier. And that's really nice. There's a gondola that goes up to a mountain, Mount Roberts, and you get panoramic views over Gastineau Channel. And you can see, if you climb up further up the mountain, you can see backwards to British Columbia, or you can look across to Douglas Island. I mean, it's beautiful. And there's a gondola that goes right up, right? So yeah. There are some memorials to men that have died at sea. And so it's a sobering reality, but the waterfront is done really nicely. It's set up for tourism. Generally speaking, the Southeast Alaskan economy planned for over 2 million cruise ship visitors. And that changed in COVID. I mean, they cut out cruise ships entirely during COVID. Alaska passed some new legislation that allows cruise ships to bypass Canada. Canada is still not allowing cruise ships to come through, but now cruise ships can come directly up from, say, Seattle to Southeast Alaska. So they'll be coming back. So our waterfront, all the dock there and the shops, it's set up for tourism, and it's neat to walk along, and there's some legit stuff to check out. There's some touristy stuff to check out too. But on a sunny day, that's a pretty nice thing to do as well. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I just based upon when you first said it, I felt, for me, the way you described your, what you do on a daily basis, it's kind of like how my trip to Moab, Utah was. We did 4 days. We mountain biked 125 miles in total over the course of 4 days, but they were Black Diamond roads that were on the outskirts of Canyonland National Park. So it wasn't a flat ride at all. I mean, you had to work for it. 3 nights of perimeter camping. But, for that, in the same reflection, that's how I felt. There was completely disconnected from the world. I was able to refine myself, refine the love I have for myself in this world and the people in it. And I got to do it for my best buddies and 2 strangers who became friends to us, or actually technically 4 strangers, the 2 guides and the 2 other guys who were put into our group. And we all became one unit for 4 days. And I tell you what, man, that was, I could describe it to you, but and that's for anybody listening, until you actually disconnect from the world and cleanse your soul, you're not going to understand it of what we're really saying. Because I could sit here till I'm blue in the face and tell you what it's like, but you have to experience it. And the way you described what you do brought me right back to those moments.
Yeah. No, we're really blessed to get out and enjoy beautiful places with people. It's a blessing to do that. It's a blessing to have that fitness, to be in a place where it's so accessible. I mean, we're blessed to have that, but you say it right. I mean, it helps refine and transform who you are getting out in those experiences. I get to be the best version of who I am.
Absolutely. Amen. Well, we are actually, we're approaching the time for one sip, man. Do you have a beer ready?
Yeah, go grab you one.
All right.
All right, so we got. Oh, I had to grab it cold. Couldn't leave one sitting out here warm. So it's a Dark Star Imperial Oatmeal Stout. So
All right.
pretty good way to go.
Is that Alaskan Brewery?
It is not. It's a Pacific Northwest beer. So
Okay.
but like Deschutes is pretty popular up here. Some pretty popular breweries in Oregon and Washington make their way up to Alaska. So yeah.
Nice. Well, and while you're doing that one, this one I have right here is going to be called, or it's actually spelled out Lager, Lager, and this is another one by we had them on the show last time, but this is Black Horizons here in Willowbrook, so it's only 20 minutes from where I live, and they've been putting out some great beer. So this one is I have not had this one yet, so this is going to be a true rating. So
Yeah.
let's sip. Everybody knows the rules. Let's get at it. Ooh, that's good. I haven't been disappointed by any of their beers, and I'll tell you what, this lager that I have right now, as light as it is, it has almost like a honey taste to it, and that's very refreshing.
Nice.
This is if I give it on a scale 1 to 5, definitely I'd say 4.25. 4.25 for this one. It has good. The back notes are good. It's all around full body's really good. I just gotta make sure I'm settled on a 4.25.
Yeah.
Maybe 4.35. What about yours, man?
Pretty good stout. So, I like something that's hearty. It's got some oomph to it. It's an oatmeal stout, so it's got that kind of opening grain of the earth. And the finish is nitro, maybe a little bit of coffee in there. I'd say, solid 4.1. And I'm not out doing anything fun yet. So we have a rating in Alaska. So everything is better when you're in the field. So it's a 4.1 sitting in a chair with you, even though this is a great podcast. But if I'm having this out on a beach in a remote area, it's a solid 4.6 at that point in time. So
awesome. Yeah. Hey, man, can't beat it. Cheers again.
Cheers.
Dilly. All right. So we are close to that time, man. I almost feel like we did this, and the questions are even more than what I was expecting. So thank you so much for filling us in on, not only just what Juneau has to be, but the lifestyle. The lifestyle is the biggest thing, man, and how the Alaskan way, how it is. I hope our listeners really get the perspective of what you're doing for your life and become inspired to do the best, to do and be the best they can be, man. So thank you again for coming on and talking about everything, that makes you.
Yeah, happy to.
Is there anybody or any sponsors you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, Jackson Adventures has been great. We're trying to get some pretty good gear up here this summer and fall, so we'll see if we can pull that off logistically. But man, it's been a fantastic relationship. They're coming out with some great boats, and it's an organization that cares about what we've talked about on this podcast, getting out there and being the best version of ourselves in a pristine environment. And so I'm appreciative of that. Tell you what, when I'm going remote, it's been really nice having Advanced Elements kayaks, be able to pack something in. I think my lightest one, it's 24 pounds by the time everything's packed down, and put that in a backpack. And pretty nice to have a kayak ready to go at that level. They've come up with a couple of cool angling inflatables as well. So I've got a Straight Edge Angler Pro from them that's been great in Alaska. Benny Branches is fantastic. I've got their carbon Angler Pro paddle, and that has been fantastic to have in the field. It's tough when things get really cold on your hands after a while, and that carbon is a lot nicer in the cold than aluminum, let me tell you. So Benny Branches has been fantastic. Getting out and doing these kinds of things, a nonprofit that I work with, Agathos International, it's been fantastic to be able to serve with a sweet spot for me and my life, and being able to encourage folks and get them out and environments where they feel like they can tackle and open up to, I would say, transformation through things that they're working on in their lives. That's been fantastic. So having some organizational support to do that. And so, yeah, I'm excited for next steps, and next steps are possible with a lot of gratitude towards organizations that have supported me. So I'm grateful.
Very good. Very good. Well, Josiah, I want to thank you again. And then to our listeners, I hope you guys really got something out of this. It's not often we always hear, the travel, but this one really puts into perspective, what a lot of us are about when we're outdoors, man, and why we love the outdoors and why we love where we're at. Again, thank you for your perspectives. I want to close out by mentioning that we are on Waypoint TV now. So for those who are listening, if you don't know, now you know, we are on Waypoint TV. Check us out. But if you are listening to this and you are in the Midwest, it's too late. It's going on. But this weekend, specifically Saturday, the day that this airs, we have the PNF tournament in Madison. So if you're not signed up, you're listening to this, too late, but sign up for the Fox tournament event. You will see me there. You will see a lot of us there. And that's going to be a big one because that is home waters for a lot of us. So, guys, thanks again for listening. This has been Off the Water. Till next time, peace. Thank you, Josiah.
Thanks, JP.